I've been carrying this weight for months now. This impossible choice between my marriage and my personal boundaries. Every night I lie awake wondering if I'm the villain in this story, the heartless monster who won't open his home to someone in desperate need because of my own selfish comfort. My wife barely looks at me anymore, and the silence in our apartment is deafening. The person I promised to build a life with now looks at me like I'm a stranger with a heart of stone. What kind of person am I? I never imagined I'd be in this position. At 27, I thought I had my life figured out. A government career that promised stability, a beautiful wife who's pursuing her dreams in medicine, and a future that seemed bright, if somewhat nomadic. We met 4 years ago, when we were both still figuring out who we wanted to be. She was studying pre-med, passionate and driven, her eyes lighting up whenever she talked about helping others. I was just starting my career in government service, excited about the possibilities it offered, proud to serve my country, even if it meant sacrificing stability. The first time I saw her was at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was arguing passionately about healthcare inequality, gesturing with a plastic cup of cheap wine, refusing to back down even when challenged by a guy twice her size. I fell for her courage before I even knew her name. That night, we talked until everyone else had gone home, sitting on our friend's porch as the summer night cooled around us. I knew then that she was different, someone who lived her convictions rather than just talking about them. We fell in love quickly, that kind of love that makes you rearrange your life without question. When we got married 2 years ago, we knew my career would mean moving frequently, sometimes internationally. She accepted that reality, and we promised to make our home wherever we ended up together. No kids, just us against the world. That was our plan, our understanding. Our wedding was small, just close friends and immediate family in her parents' backyard. We wrote our own vows. Mine included promises to support her dreams, to be her partner through every challenge, to build a life that honored both our paths. Hers included acceptance of our nomadic future, understanding of my commitment to service, and a promise to create a home within herself rather than in any physical place. We thought we'd covered every contingency, prepared for every sacrifice. My job requires long hours and unusual dedication. I often work late, sometimes through weekends. There are weeks when I leave before sunrise and return after she's asleep, my dinner waiting in the microwave with a sweet note beside it. My wife understands. She's busy with medical school herself. The apartment is often littered with her textbooks, sticky notes on every surface, the coffee pot constantly running to fuel her late-night study sessions. Our time together is precious and rare. Some weeks we only see each other for a few meaningful hours, both of us exhausted but determined to connect. We guard our Sunday mornings jealously, the only time that's truly ours, when we make pancakes and talk about everything and nothing, rebuilding our connection before another demanding week begins. We knew this season of our lives would be challenging, but we were committed to making it work. What I didn't expect was how the foundation of our marriage would be tested not by distance or time apart, but by a third person who needs more than either of us might be able to give. A third person whose needs threaten to reshape everything about the delicate balance we've created for ourselves. My wife's best friend has been in her life since childhood. They grew up together, shared secrets, dreams, and supported each other through everything. I've seen their old photos. 2 gangly girls with braces and matching friendship bracelets. Teenagers sneaking out to concerts. College freshmen with bright eyes and grand plans. When an accident in her late teens left her disabled and unable to walk, my wife was there for her every step of the recovery journey. She deferred her own education for a semester to help with physical therapy, learned medical procedures no 19-year-old should have to know, and fought with insurance companies when they tried to deny coverage. Their bond runs deeper than most friendships. They're more like sisters, connected by shared history and unwavering loyalty. My wife tells stories about their childhood with such vivid detail that sometimes I feel like I was there too. How they made a pact at 12 to live next door to each other when they grew up. How they planned to start their own medical practice together before the accident changed everything. How they held each other through first heartbreaks, family deaths, and every other crisis of growing up. When I first met her friend, I saw immediately what my wife valued so much: her sharp wit, her refusal to be defined by her disability, her genuine interest in others despite her own difficulties. Her friend's situation breaks my heart. She lives with family who have slowly descended into hoarding. It didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual decline that accelerated after her accident. The home, once normal, is now cluttered with narrow pathways between stacks of newspapers, broken appliances, and forgotten purchases. The bathroom is barely functional, with towels that haven't been washed in months and medications expired and scattered across countertops. The kitchen, a health hazard, with rotting food sometimes left for weeks. For someone in a wheelchair, it's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous and dehumanizing. The hallways are too narrow for her to navigate independently. The ramp installed years ago is now blocked by discarded furniture. Her independence diminishes a little more each day as the chaos encroaches further on her limited space. My wife visits her there weekly, bringing groceries, helping with laundry, doing what she can in the few hours she can spare. She comes home quiet, sometimes crying, often spending hours in the shower as if trying to wash away more than just the physical grime. She tells me stories that haunt me. How her friend can't access most of the house, how she's essentially confined to one small room, how the family seems incapable of acknowledging the squalor they've created. She describes cockroaches crawling over medical supplies, the smell of mold pervading everything, the impossibility of maintaining dignity in such conditions. How her friend has to ration her water intake because getting to the bathroom requires calling for help that sometimes doesn't come for hours. How she's developed persistent respiratory issues from the dust and mold. How she's stopped inviting anyone else to visit out of shame for conditions she cannot control. The worst part is that her friend has no viable alternatives. Nursing homes for younger disabled adults are notorious for neglect and abuse. My wife has researched this extensively, shown me heartbreaking exposés and statistics. She's forwarded me investigative articles exposing systematic neglect, elder abuse, and the particular horrors faced by younger disabled people forced to live in facilities designed for the elderly. She's made me watch documentaries that left me sleepless for days, confronting me with the reality that institutions ostensibly designed to care often warehouse humans instead. Her friend is only 26. The thought of her spending decades in an institution where she might be mistreated, where her youth and intellect would wither from lack of stimulation, where she might face abuse from staff or fellow residents, is unbearable. Government assistance programs have waiting lists years long. Section 8. Housing in our area has a 7-year wait list. Accessible apartments that accept housing vouchers are unicorns, mythical creatures that everyone has heard of, but no one has actually seen. Disability payments barely cover basic necessities, let alone independent housing in a safe area. Without substantial financial resources of her own, she's trapped in a situation that deteriorates a little more each day. Some nights, my wife cries in the shower where she thinks I can't hear her. I've overheard her phone conversations, promising her friend will figure something out, and I won't let you live like this forever. I've seen her researching accessible housing options in every city where my job might take us, bookmarking floor plans and saving links to accessibility modification companies. I understand why my wife feels responsible. I would too, if someone I loved was suffering while I was building a comfortable life. Her compassion is one of the qualities I fell in love with. Her fierce protection of the vulnerable, her refusal to look away from suffering when most people would. But understanding doesn't make the solution any easier to accept. Understanding the depth of her commitment to her friend doesn't automatically expand the boundaries of what I can give. The first time my wife mentioned having her friend move in with us, it was casual, theoretical. We were lying in bed, the blue light of the television washing over us as we half-watched a documentary about accessible architecture. She whispered, "Sometimes I think about how different her life would be if she could just live with us." Her voice was soft, but weighted with longing. I murmured something non-committal, assuming it was just a wishful thought, the kind of idealistic musing that comes in quiet moments but rarely translates to action. I should have known better. My wife has never been the type to speak without purpose, especially about matters of care and responsibility. Over the following months, these comments became more frequent, more detailed. She stopped framing them as hypotheticals and started presenting them as possibilities. My wife would mention how a certain apartment layout would accommodate a wheelchair, or how a particular city we might be stationed in had excellent medical care for her friend's condition. She began measuring doorways in our current apartment, researching AITA compliance standards, looking into transfer benches for the shower. I'd catch her studying floor plans late at night, sketching modifications to make spaces more accessible. Our conversations about future postings began to revolve around healthcare quality and accessibility infrastructure, rather than career opportunities or quality of life for the two of us. I began to realize this wasn't just a passing idea for her. It was becoming a plan, gradually solidifying from vague wish to concrete intention. But still, I avoided the direct conversation. I nodded when she showed me accessible apartment listings, made appropriate sounds of interest when she talked about cities with good paratransit systems. I was delaying the inevitable confrontation, hoping perhaps that the logistical challenges would become apparent to her without my having to voice my reservations. Yesterday, she finally laid it all out. We were having dinner, one of our rare evenings together. I'd made her favorite pasta, opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving. For once, neither of us was exhausted or distracted. The evening felt precious, a reminder of the simple joy of being together amid our chaotic schedules. She reached for my hand across the table and said, "I need to talk to you about something important." Her eyes were filled with determination and hope, but there was something else there too, a vulnerability that made my stomach clench with anticipation. "I want my best friend to come live with us, permanently, as part of our family." Even though I'd seen this coming, hearing it stated so definitively hit me like a physical blow. The pasta turned to cement in my mouth. The wine suddenly tasted sour. I didn't immediately respond, which she took as encouragement to continue, though in reality I was trying to process the enormity of what she was proposing. This wasn't a temporary solution, or a helping hand through a rough patch. This was a fundamental restructuring of our lives, our marriage, our future. She'd thought it all through with the meticulous attention to detail that makes her such a good medical student. She had spreadsheets on her laptop, which she opened to show me as she explained. Her friend needed minimal medical assistance, mostly help with transfers and some daily activities that my wife was already trained to provide. My wife was confident that between her medical training and whatever assistance programs we could access, they could manage the care needs without significant burden on either of us. Her friend could contribute financially through remote work once settled. She had a degree in graphic design that she'd never been able to fully utilize due to her living situation. They'd respect our privacy and marriage, my wife assured me, creating schedules and boundaries that protected our relationship while providing the support her friend desperately needed. She had answers prepared for every practical concern I might raise, as if she'd been having this conversation in her head for months, anticipating my objections, building her case with the precision of a lawyer preparing for a critical trial. "She's dying in that house," my wife said, tears welling in her eyes. Her voice cracked with emotion, and she gripped my hand tighter. "Not physically, but spiritually. Her mind is dulling from isolation. Her spirit is breaking from constant dependency on people who resent her needs. Her family doesn't see her anymore. They just see a burden, an inconvenience, a complication to their hoarding. She used to paint, did you know that? She was studying art before the accident. Now her supplies gather dust because there's nowhere clean to set up an easel. She used to laugh so easily. Now I have to coax even a smile from her." She wiped away tears with the back of her hand. "She deserves better. We could give her better." My wife described how her friend had helped her through her parents' divorce in high school, how she'd been the only one who believed in my wife's medical school dreams when everyone else said she wasn't smart enough, how she'd once been vibrant and independent before circumstance and family dysfunction conspired to trap her. How much potential was being wasted every day she remained in that environment. The passion in her voice was undeniable. Her compassion, her loyalty, these are qualities I've always admired in her, qualities that make her the extraordinary person I married. In other circumstances, I would have been moved to action by her advocacy, proud of her fierce defense of someone vulnerable. But as she spoke, a cold knot of dread formed in my stomach, expanding until I felt physically ill. Our small apartments, our limited time together, our constantly shifting lives. Where would another person fit? Not just any person, but someone requiring special consideration, accessible modifications, medical equipment. Someone whose needs would inevitably take precedence over preferences or conveniences. Someone who would inevitably change the fundamental nature of our marriage, introducing a permanent witness to our most intimate moments, a constant consideration in every decision from where we live to how we spend our rare free time. I wish I could say I responded with immediate compassion. I wish I could say I embraced this chance to help someone in need, that I rose to the occasion like the hero my wife clearly expected me to be. I wish I could say I saw this as an opportunity to expand our family circle, to demonstrate the values of care and commitment that we both claim to believe in. But the truth is uglier, more selfish, more complicated. "I don't think I can do that," I said quietly, the words feeling heavy and inadequate as they left my mouth. The disappointment on my wife's face was immediate and crushing. It wasn't anger. That would have been easier to face. It was a profound disillusionment, as if she was seeing a fundamental character flaw in me for the first time. Her eyes, so full of hope and certainty moments before, clouded with confusion. and then hardened with judgment. I watched her expression change and felt something essential slipping away between us. Trust, respect, shared vision. I tried to explain, the words tumbling out clumsily as I scrambled to justify feelings that seemed increasingly shameful under her gaze. I told her how much I valued our privacy, our space, the sanctuary we'd created for ourselves amid the chaos of our demanding lives. How I struggled with the idea of sharing my home, even with my own parents or siblings for extended periods. How I'd always been someone who needed solitude to function properly. How the constant presence of another person, regardless of who they were, would affect my mental health, my ability to decompress from my high-stress job. I explained that introversion wasn't a choice or a preference, but a fundamental aspect of how I interact with the world. That, for me, being constantly aware of another person's presence, constantly navigating their needs and moods, was emotionally and mentally draining in a way that might be difficult for her to understand. That after days of navigating complex social dynamics at work, of being on for colleagues and superiors, I needed our home to be a place where I could truly relax, where social performance wasn't required. I told her that the nature of my government work meant unpredictable relocations, sometimes to housing designated only for employees and immediate family. That some postings might be in facilities or compounds with strict regulations about residence. That certain international assignments might be impossible with her friend in tow. Dodi. I explained the security clearance issues that might arise, the housing allowance complications, the potential career limitations if I had turned down certain assignments due to accommodation concerns. I described scenarios we might face, being assigned to a small efficiency apartment in a high-cost city, being stationed in a country with poor accessibility infrastructure, being housed in a government compound where every resident required specific authorization. I laid out the practical challenges that my pragmatic wife would normally appreciate, hoping to appeal to her logical side, rather than appearing simply unwilling. I reminded her that we barely saw each other as it was. How would adding another person to our household affect the precious little time we managed to carve out for ourselves? Our Sunday morning pancake ritual, our rare date nights, the quiet moments of connection between her studies and my work, all would be fundamentally altered by a permanent third presence. Even with the best intentions and clearest boundaries, the dynamics of our marriage would shift to accommodate another person's needs, schedule, and presence. I suggested compromises, my mind racing to find solutions that might address her friend's desperate situation without upending our lives completely. What if we helped her friend find better living arrangements? Perhaps an accessible apartment we could partially subsidize. What if we contributed financially to a caregiver who could improve her current situation? Someone who could clean regularly and help with daily needs. What if we used our combined resources to get her on waitlists for reputable assisted living facilities specifically designed for younger adults with disabilities? What if, and this was my most generous offer, we built or purchased a property with a separate living space, a guest house or mother-in-law suite where her friend could have independence while still being close. This arrangement could provide her friend with dignity and support while preserving the boundaries of our marriage. Each suggestion I offered felt like throwing a lifeline, desperately trying to find middle ground between abandoning someone in need and completely restructuring our lives. Each compromise represented the maximum I felt capable of giving without losing myself and our marriage in the process. But with each alternative I proposed, my wife's expression hardened. Her eyes grew colder, more distant with every suggestion. She wasn't looking for compromises or partial solutions. She wasn't interested in mitigating the situation or finding middle ground. She was looking for me to match her level of commitment to someone she loved. Total, unconditional, and immediate. She was asking me to expand my definition of family overnight, to transform our marriage from a partnership of two to a caretaking unit of three, without reservation or adjustment period. The more I spoke, the more I realized we weren't having the same conversation. I was trying to solve a problem while preserving what we had built together. She was asking me to become someone different, someone whose boundaries were as expansive as hers, whose capacity for sacrifice matched her own. She was measuring my character by a standard I hadn't agreed to, finding me wanting in ways I hadn't been prepared to be judged. "So you're saying no," she finally said. "Not a question." A statement, flat and final, cutting through my careful explanations and compromise attempts. 3 simple words that reduced all my nuanced concerns to a binary choice. Yes or no, compassion or selfishness, her way or rejection. I'm saying I can't share our primary living space long term, I clarified, desperate to avoid the oversimplification. But I am open to helping in other ways. I want to help her. I just need to find a way that works for all of us, that preserves what we've built together. She stood up, leaving her dinner half-eaten. The scrape of her chair against the floor felt like a physical representation of the distance suddenly opening between us. You don't understand what's at stake for her, she said. Her voice was quiet, but sharp with disappointment. You're asking me to leave my best friend and neglect because you want your comfort. You're asking me to watch someone I love suffer when we have the power to help her. Do you realize what you're asking of me? The conversation deteriorated from there, spiraling into that particular kind of argument where every word seems to widen the gap rather than bridge it. The kitchen light felt too harsh, highlighting every micro-expression of disappointment, every gesture of frustration. My wife revealed that she already discussed possibilities with her friend, not hypothetically, but as concrete plans being set in motion. They'd looked into accessibility modifications for apartments we hadn't even rented yet. They'd researched programs for disabled adults in cities where we might be stationed, getting on wait lists just in case. They discussed bedroom arrangements, bathroom modifications, daily schedules, practical details that made it clear how thoroughly this plan had been developed without my knowledge or input. In her mind, this wasn't a question of if, but how. My consent was assumed, my participation expected. She'd been proceeding for months, on the assumption that, of course, I would welcome her friend into our home. Because what kind of person wouldn't? What kind of husband wouldn't support such a clear moral imperative? The revelation that she'd been planning this future without consulting me felt like a betrayal, a unilateral decision about our shared life that I was now being asked to rubber stamp rather than genuinely consider. What hurt the most was when she said, "If you won't let by the end of the night," we were sleeping in separate rooms. Me, in our bed, staring at the ceiling. Her, on the couch, probably texting her friend about what an unsupportive husband she had. It's been 3 days since that conversation. We've been circling each other in our apartment, exchanging only necessary information. The silence between us is deafening. I've spent hours researching options for her friend. Government programs, assistance organizations, accessible housing alternatives. I've looked into the costs of building additions onto future homes, the legalities of having a non-family member join us in government housing, the financial implications of supporting another adult potentially for decades. Everything I find reinforces the complexity of the situation. There are no easy answers, no perfect solutions, only difficult choices with significant consequences. My wife is right about one thing. Nursing homes and assisted living facilities can be terrible places for young disabled adults. The stories of neglect and abuse are horrific. Her friend doesn't deserve that. Nobody does. But am I wrong for wanting to maintain boundaries around our marriage? For wanting our home to be our sanctuary? For being uncomfortable with permanently sharing my most intimate living space with someone who isn't my partner or child? When I try to imagine our future with her friend living with us, I see a fundamental shift in our marriage dynamic. I see myself always being conscious of another person's presence, never fully relaxed in my own home. I see decisions being made with her needs in mind, where we live, how we structure our space, how we spend our time. I see my relationship with my wife forever altered by this third person who will always be between us. But when I imagine saying no definitively, I see my wife's resentment growing. I see her caught between loyalty to her friend and commitment to our marriage. I see her heart breaking as she's forced to abandon someone she loves to a situation that's slowly crushing her spirit. I see my wife never forgiving me for what she perceives as selfishness. Last night, my wife finally broke the silence. She didn't yell or cry. She just looked at me with profound disappointment and said, "I never thought you were this kind of person." Those words have been echoing in my head ever since. What kind of person am I? Someone who prioritizes his comfort over another's desperate need? Someone who can't expand his definition of family to include someone important to his wife? Someone who would leave a disabled person in squalor because it's more convenient? Or am I someone with reasonable boundaries? Someone who recognizes that good intentions don't always make for sustainable living situations? Someone who understands that our marriage needs protection and nurturing? The truth is, I don't know anymore. Every time I convince myself I'm being reasonable, I imagine her friend sitting alone in that filthy house, trapped and forgotten. Every time I consider giving in, I imagine the slow erosion of my marriage, my home no longer feeling like my own. I love my wife. I respect her compassion and loyalty. But I'm terrified that this situation has no solution where everyone wins, where her friend gets the care she needs, where my wife fulfills her sense of obligation, and where our marriage remains intact and healthy. Perhaps what scares me most is the possibility that this reveals a fundamental incompatibility between us. My wife sees family as something expansive, something that can include those who need it most. I see it as something more defined, something that needs protection and boundaries to thrive. This morning, my wife told me she's going to visit her friend this weekend. She wants me to come with her, to see the conditions firsthand, to understand why she feels so desperate to help. Part of me wants to refuse. To see it would make it real, in a way I couldn't ignore. It would make my reluctance harder to justify, even to myself. But I agreed to go, because regardless of where we end up on this issue, I owe it to my wife and her friend to fully understand what's at stake. To make my decision with complete information rather than abstract concerns. I don't know what happens after that. Maybe seeing the situation will change my perspective entirely. Maybe it will only reinforce my concerns. Maybe we'll find a compromise neither of us has considered yet. What I do know is that this decision will define our marriage, perhaps even determine whether it survives. If I remain firm in my boundaries, I may lose my wife to resentment and divided loyalty. If I concede, I may lose the marriage I thought we were building together, replaced by something fundamentally different that I never agreed to. I keep asking myself what a good person would do in this situation. What a good husband would do. What a compassionate human being would do. The answers aren't clear. So I ask you, strangers on the internet who have no stake in this situation, am I the asshole for being unwilling to share my home with my wife's disabled best friend, even knowing the terrible conditions she's living in? Am I wrong for wanting to maintain the privacy and independence of our marriage? Am I selfish for not being willing to sacrifice my comfort for someone in genuine need? I honestly don't know anymore. All I know is that whatever decision we make will change everything, for better or worse.